Hello, everyone. So today in our episode of All About FP&A, I have with us Mitchell Govindsamy. Mitchell is from UK. She's born and brought up in South Africa. She's a management consultant in a Big Four, working specifically in financial services. Hi, Mitchell. Welcome to All About FP&A.
Hi, Asif. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we could finally get together and get the diaries in order to do this.
Amazing. Yeah, I am excited for this as well. So we have a lot of questions for you, but before we get to them, why don't you give us a quick background about how you started your career and how has your journey been in the last 15 years?
Sure. So I studied finance. I'm an associate with the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. I trained with Deloitte South Africa many years ago, specializing in financial services, predominantly insurance and credit risk. After my articles within Deloitte, I joined an insurer in a management accounting role. And basically, in my time in that role, I did anything and everything I could do to understand the basics of accounting, from coding invoices, posting journals, to eventually ending up as a financial manager looking at budgeting and forecasting. And that was within the insurance industry. I decided to leave that insurer because it was a mid-sized finance department with not a lot of room to grow. So I moved, I wanted something big where I knew I could do many roles over, over a long period of time. So I wouldn't have to change companies. And I set my sights on Barclays. It was one of the largest financial institutions in South Africa at the time. And I was fortunate to land a role as a finance business partner. And that started my finance business partner journey. I was the finance business partner for the loyalty program at Barclays. Customer loyalty is extremely data rich. So that also helped me in my love for data and analytics. I took up a role within business at Barclays as well, as the head of commercial modeling and analytics for the loyalty program. So again, that just connection with finance and data and analytics that seemed to have set the scene for my career thereafter. I also did a stint as a finance business partner within digital banking, which is very exciting for Barclays. And about 3 years ago, for personal reasons, my family relocated to the UK from South Africa. So it's been a short time in the UK, interesting journey through COVID and trying to, start my career and get my family together here in the UK. But I've had some very interesting roles, a finance business partner with a private equity-backed insurer, insurance broker, very interesting in how we were buying out businesses and how do we consolidate the finance function. I did a little stint as the head of FP&A for a fledgling startup, a 1-year-old startup with big ambitions. And that was great because it was all like blue sky. What should FP&A look like? No legacy systems, just, whatever my heart desired in the latest sort of technology. And then I think I found a little home at a Big Four firm. And I've been at the Big Four for 8 months now. I have to say, moving from industry into consulting is challenging. It's not easy. It's a very different environment, but it is very exciting. So I'm still finding my feet and finding my space. The team I'm involved in is called Business Finance Advisory, and we do exactly that. FP&A and FBP consulting. How do we support our clients in their FP&A and FBP journey, and with a big focus on finance and analytics?
Amazing. So I noticed you have been across more than 5 different roles. At least I could count 5 on my fingers. We moved from audit into finance, then from finance into a business role, and then from business role back into a consulting role. So what part of the transition was the most difficult? Was it from audit to finance? Was it from finance to business, or the last one, which is from again back from business to consulting?
I would have to say, and it could be just the perspective and where I am in the journey, the move from industry into consulting. So this recent move I've done, and because I'm in it at the moment. It's been it's been more challenging than I had expected it to be. Having had a long career, having had all these tools in my toolkit, I expected it to be an easy transition. With my view that, hey, I know how to handle people conversations, I know who to speak to, I'm confident. It should be easier than when I did my articles and I was younger and I was more, in my shell. But I may be very different, but I'm in a different country. And so there were numerous things. But consulting in itself is a business on its own. And I'm sorry for the noise in the background. It's just the morning travel. But consulting in itself is very different from industry. We may sit in industry and see the work the consultants do for us as clients, which is great. I find that extremely rewarding, working with the client. But there's also the business of consulting behind you that you have to navigate. And especially in a Big Four, it's it takes time to ease into that, to understand it. I think another thing I'm dealing with is a multi-generational workforce, which is exciting. It's exciting working with young, ambitious, talented people. But there's just so many different perspectives that we're all bringing. And I think what happens in that case, and especially being multicultural teams and multidisciplinary teams, is we are all speaking different languages. I may be sitting next to someone who's an actuary and speaking accounting, and then we're speaking to a project manager who's speaking project. Those are the little nuances that I have had to appreciate. Where when I was in industry, I was speaking to people who were experts in banking, that product, that thing. We're all speaking the same language. And that is what I've definitely been the biggest learning, is you aren't speaking to people who are seeing things from the same perspective as you, and they are not seeing things from your perspective. So you need to figure out how you communicate. So that's been the biggest challenge.
Understood. Yeah, and that makes sense, because when you are in industry, it is something that you can easily study and get insights about one industry. But when you are in consulting, you're working across industry, you're working across different other, like, multiple projects at a time, versus in industry you just focus on one business. That can be more challenging. All right, let's move on to the topic for our today's conversation, which is one of my favorite topics, which is data analytics of finance. While we talk about that, a couple of things which people might be interested in is data analytics necessary for finance or FP&A professionals? Is it something they need to spend their time on, or is it something just a good to have skill? So if we could cover that, that will be fantastic.
Okay, great, sure. Should I start with that question? Can I start with that particular question?
Yeah.
So the answer to that is, and I don't even think it's a biased view, it's the truth. Yes, as an FP&A professional, your understanding finance is not enough at all. The debits and the credits, that's just your background knowledge. You should have, that's what you have in your pocket. That's the specialty you bring. Great. The on-the-job skills are your financial modeling, your data and analytics, understanding the data environment of your organization, it's critical, and not just FP&A, throughout finance, whether you're a finance business partner, whether you're a controller, even if you're doing more compliance activities and regulatory returns, there's so much data. Everything is going to be about the data. Everything is coming through more sophisticated systems. We need to understand that. We need to understand that our financial statements are purely the product of all this data and operations that's happening in the background. And we have to have an appreciation for that. So financial modeling is not going away. We and it's the exciting part, it's the cool part. So we do need to make sure we have those skills in our tool set. We do need to know that we understand a bit about the data environment. But having said that, there is so much to know. You just need to understand what you need to know for your role. You can't know everything, and certain things are good for certain times. So just be conscious of that. There is so much information in this world. So really be conscious of what you focus your time on. So getting into the topic on that note, which is a very relevant question. And hopefully it will get everyone who's listening paying attention that yes, data analytics is very important in FP&A. I mean, it's in the name, right? Analysis. We need to analyze that data. And I think FP&A is that space where it's so important. I mean, FP&A is kind of the coolest place in finance, right? I could be biased, but between FP&A and finance business partnering, I mean, those are the very exciting kind of places to be in. And that's where it's very data rich. And it takes a lot more skills, additional skills than just the debits and credits and your transactional knowledge. So I wanted to start the conversation just sharing how did me, someone who studied a traditional accounting background, and that was my route, how did I get so involved in data and analytics, and what does a finance professional who considers themselves a finance analytics specialist, what does that career journey look like, and why do I say that that is my specialty? And just, to give context. So I have given the background of my career, but where the data analytics part really started being a focus and kind of where I started branching off to that was in Barclays. Prior, my roles were very more management accounting, financial management, and I say quite traditional. When I moved into Barclays, as I said, I was a finance business partner, but I was still just preparing management accounts at the beginning and just kind of very superficially explaining things and really focusing more on expenses, as sometimes we do as accountants. We want to focus on the expenses, but that wasn't what my business were interested in. They were interested in what was happening with their revenue. And to me, as an accountant, revenue was just this one line, and great, I knew there was various aspects of it, but getting that push and having to forecast this revenue and that push from my business to forecast it at a driver level, to understand drivers, to get the information for those drivers, like kind of opened me up to this world of the data driving that number. And not only understanding the drivers, understanding how do I measure these drivers? How do I actually gather the data? How do I explain to the operational team what information their systems need to have for us to forecast better and measure ourselves better? And that is where that kind of, you're on the cusp. When you start having that conversation about drivers, you go to that deeper of how do I get this? How do I measure it? And you start looking at the data. Now, being at a major bank is an absolute, privilege when you're on this data journey, because financial services, banking, there is no shortage of data, no shortage of any system, any platform, someone is using it. So that's great, the great part of being in a large organization. The other thing I had at my disposal was absolute data and analytics experts in their field, experts in the country, experts globally.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another, thing that really I didn't have to sit and ponder by myself. There was an actuarial team, there was a pricing team, and I could go and sit with them and look at their models, look at SaaS. I worked when I was in loyalty, we worked with a consulting company who managed all our data, and just going to their offices and seeing what they do on SQL, SaaS. And I was very curious about, okay, what systems do you use? When do you use SQL? When do you use SaaS? And, I think some of the data professionals are so overworked. They're grateful if you say, I want to run that script. So just tell me how to do it. No one's going to say, no, you can't run the script yourself, And that really started that journey. I think the biggest part is having people who are willing to take some time out of their diary and speak to you. And when you approach people from an area of, I'm so interested in what you do, everyone's willing to share. And that is what was the greatest thing for me at Barclays. It's the analysts, the absolute smart people that were, when you show an interest in what you do, they will share with you. And that's kind of what started my journey. I wasn't blocked. No one was like, no, this is top secret, only I should know this. No, it was completely, we want to tell you, this is why I use SaaS. This is why I use SQL. You can run this yourself. So that was great being in those environments. And what I can encourage anyone to do is don't sit behind your desk in the place you work at. Find those people. Whatever you're interested in, like me, it was data analytics, it was SaaS, it was SQL, it was all these systems. I found the people in the organization. If I was in a meeting and someone mentioned something, when we walked out of that room, I said, hey, I'm really interested in that. You mentioned that system. I have an interest. Do you mind grabbing a cup of coffee and telling me more about it? When do you use it? And things like that. So really the place I work became my university. And that was my career at Barclays and how I branched off into data and analytics. I think the biggest deviation in my career was when I moved out of the finance business partnering role and into the business. I took up a role it was called value management, which I believe is what FP&A is, but it was head of, if I had to describe it, it was head of commercial modeling and analytics for the loyalty program. So to me, that's FP&A, a large part of FP&A. And what was so good about that role is I left behind a lot of the pain of finance, the month end, the kind of manual loading budgets and, trying to get reports to reconcile. All I was doing in this value management role was the fun stuff, the forecasting, the commercial modeling, the analytics, helping business make decisions, making sure we had the right data to make those decisions. One of the things I did was support in the implementation of Tableau as a self-service tool. So another thing, the analysts who I worked with in my team were getting bogged down with like just pulling reports, etc. And there was so much they could add from a commercial modeling analytics perspective, but they were getting bogged down with pulling these reports. So we wanted everyone to have a self-service tool. And, people don't like self-service tools, but that's one of the things we implemented so that people could start upskilling. And that's the importance of, to your initial question, it's not only in FP&A that you need to understand data and analytics. Data literacy, no matter the role you're coming in at in the workforce, data literacy is critical. Everyone's using tools like Tableau or Power BI. And you need to understand what these things are saying to you. So that was some of the things I learned in my role. And it's so interesting in that journey that finance in my organization started catching on to these finance people who moved into business and are doing these cool commercial roles and wanted it back. And I took a role back in finance for digital banking, basically supporting the finance business partners in getting their correct data and analytics capabilities and MI platforms in place to be able to do their work better and understand data and analytics. And that's where, it became kind of my niche. Like, this is it, guys. We shouldn't be using these spreadsheets and struggling with reconciling numbers. We need to think bigger. We need to think about our processes and our systems, and are we investing in our platforms so that we can work better and do the right things for our people as well, for our finance professionals who are bogged down in poor processes. And that was kind of where data and analytics became quite a large part in my journey.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I have just a couple of questions, more that I'm curious to know that you mentioned about. One, the self-serving tool, and the other was the programming languages that you mentioned, SQL and SAS. So first one is related to SQL. So as a finance professional, what is the expectation from business? Are you expected to learn SQL as a programming language, or are you just expected to understand maybe the tool and just change some variables and be able to just run the query? So one is going deep into the programming language and understanding what the language is, and other is just learn how to run the tool and take help of maybe a data scientist in your team to understand what's there inside the script. So what do you where do you what do you suggest finance people, where should they focus on?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. And one where there isn't, with every good question, there isn't like a perfect answer to, and it's a perfect segue to, my kind of data science journey, which I will share as well, but particularly on the languages, right? There are so many programming languages out there. And on SQL particularly, it depends on your organization and the type of work that you're going to be doing, and how the data is kept and managed within your organization. SQL is more a tool or a language to access information from bigger tables and bigger systems. So there's a lot of thought that SQL is the language that everyone should learn. That's kind of a school of thought. So if you want to know where to start, learn SQL then. Maybe that's a good one to start with, if that's what you want to do. I don't think we can ever, and that's the thing in our learning journey, we shouldn't think that we are going to be an expert the way someone who lives and breathes any of these languages are. And that's okay. We don't need to be that. They're developers, and that's why we have these really smart developers in the roles they have. The importance is understanding that, okay, I want to run SQL. What does that mean? That means, like any other application, you need to have SQL on your computer. That means someone needs to give you a script to run it. And you kind of need to know the syntax, but you don't need to write code from scratch. I don't think, no one's to pull something off a system, a developer's already written the code, or, so they can give that to you. So understand that. Don't start from, especially if you're a finance professional, understand at what level you need to know this. You don't want to become a developer. They're there, they live and breathe this stuff, and they're there to help you, but you need to speak their language again. So you need to know a little bit about what you're asking them for and what their world looks like, especially in FP&A. You're going to be working with, FP&A is going to move towards being extremely multidisciplinary. So you need to be able to speak to the data scientist, and not in accounting. You need to speak to them in their language. So you need to have some sort of understanding of these various things. And it's okay to say, I don't know much about this, but I know this. And that's a great way to start a conversation. So in learning SQL, it's a great tool to have in your back pocket. You don't need to be an expert, just understand a little bit about it and then seek help. That's my advice on it. It's overwhelming, the amount of information or different codes there is out there to learn. If you just know how to say hello world and in that language, you know enough, because you know how to at least open the program, which is great, and that's my philosophy. Those are the important things, not writing the syntax. It's how do I open this program actually is some of the big blockers to these things. And, in terms of my journey, my focus is right now on Python. That's the language I've chosen. So to understand what you want to achieve. As I said, SQL, I will never say not SQL. SQL is the one. If you want to start on anything, probably use SQL because it's easier to do a lot of languages from there. The language I'm focusing on in my career is Python. It can do many things. It's so diverse. It started. I'm currently studying an applied data science course. It's about a 3-month course. It's with MIT Professional Education, and for a very long time, I've been looking for something to study. And I just couldn't find the right thing. Everyone's like, okay, do an MBA. And I'm sure those are all great. I definitely wanted to do something data analytics. I tried self-study, but self-study is a bit challenging. It's great. But sometimes you need to kind of put your money to back it up and keep you motivated. And so I selected this course that I started in September. So it's about 2 months in now. And I've got about 2 more months to go in the course. Why this course is what I wanted to speak on this in my journey is, as I said, data science is the new buzzword. Like, what is it? And you hear about all these concepts. As you said, SQL, Python, statistics, you hear about decision trees, you hear about machine learning. I wanted something that gave me an overview on all of that stuff. And that's exactly what this course has given me. It started off with intense pre-work, looking at statistics and Python before we even started the course, like months of looking at that, which was exactly what I wanted. I wanted to focus my energy on something that will give me a well-rounded view of the world. I will never, say, oh, I'm a data scientist or whatever. But I know I have kind of a view of this world. And when someone speaks machine learning, that's what that is. We're just going into decision trees and understanding all of that. So I think on that note, it's in your learning journey, we need to let go of trying to be the experts at a thing. It's okay to be a generalist at something. We are expert financial professionals. We can have a general idea of the data landscape, the data world, but know who the experts are to go to and be able to speak their language.
Understood. So if I had to summarize in 1 or 2 sentences, I would say you need not become an expert in data science or any of the programming languages, but if you are using that program or that tool in your role, you should understand at least the basics so that you are able to intelligently have conversations with people who are experts in those areas. So you should be able to understand the basics of statistics, understand basics of whatever programming languages your data scientist is using to get you the data that you want. So knowing the basics will always help you, and your partners who are data scientists or people who you are working with, they'll also appreciate that you're speaking the language.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you mentioned statistics, I mentioned it and you mentioned it. And an important part I wanted to bring up in our conversation that I think in studying this course, I realized why there is so much friction between sometimes between finance and analytics and finance
Mm-hmm.
and business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you've seen it in your career, right? When business presents their analysis, right,
Yeah.
about something, and the first thing finance says is, well, that's not my number, or,
Yeah.
but that doesn't reconcile,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't trust that system,
Yeah.
and then the conversation goes nowhere from there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I struggled with as well. And in studying this data science course and in working with
Mm-hmm.
the non-finance data and analytics teams I have, I realized the kind of biggest gap is the understanding of statistics, probability, assumption, and sampling, right? As accountants, we wanted to reconcile 100%. Before we use that system, everything has to be perfect or else we don't trust a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is not what data science and analytics is about. It's about assumption, probability, and drawing conclusions without all the information, but applying the right science to do that. And I think once, as finance professionals, we start getting a little bit comfortable with that, it will help us move along in our journey. Because a lot of times, as finance professionals from an accounting background, if the data is not perfect, we're not going to look at it. But there's no such thing as perfect data. So even in the FP&A world, you need to trust that data and understand confidence levels and understand to speak in that way, and not beat yourself up when your forecast doesn't equal reality, because it's not meant to, but how do you tell that story? So that's an important part, I think, from the accounting mindset to moving to a more analytical, and in the world of FP&A and forecasting, that's extremely important. Don't beat yourself up that, yes, your forecast is not going to be the right number. It's the conversation around it and the measures and the corrective action that we take around that. And that was like really, in studying statistics, what made me realize, like, aha, I get it. I get why we aren't moving forward as finance. It's because we want perfect data, and perfect data doesn't exist.
Makes sense. Yes. So I have experienced that as well. And learning statistics, at least knowing the basics, which is coefficient or R square or T value or S, whatever the basic terminology of statistics is very helpful when especially people in data science are using that to answer a lot of questions that the business is asking, which finance cannot answer just because finance does not have all the data. So that is something that I've experienced as well. All right,
and that's the
go
sorry,
ahead. Go ahead.
I would like to your point, that's the importance of just knowing a little bit, whether it's just reading a little article about statistics. There's so much information out there. And, anyone who's doing data science will say, it's not about that tool. It's not about knowing Python. That's just, as I said, you can Google any code, know the program and run it. It's about interpreting what you're getting out of there. And that interpretation is all about statistics. So if you're going to move into a data world, you need to know a little bit about statistics before you even say, because the data is not going to be perfect. And that's what statistics is about. It's about working with this data that's not perfect. And how do you extract information from it? And how do you trust it scientifically?
Makes sense. I think we are almost towards the end of our conversation. So last question from me would be, you mentioned you're already doing a course along with your full-time role. What else do you do to keep yourselves upgraded in terms of learning, continuous learning? The course is a big part of it, I'm sure. But what else do you do? And are there any closing remarks that you want to make to people who are listening or watching?
Okay, sure. In terms of how I keep, the biggest part in my learning journey was realizing my learning style and how best I learn. I learn by doing. I have to be an active participant in my learning So it has to be a problem I'm dealing with right now, and then saying, what is this thing I want to learn about? And then having a conversation with someone. And as I alluded to earlier on, a large part of my learning is within the places I work. As I said, I consider the places I work as my university. And because those people that you work with are at the top of their field. It's something I consider when moving to a new organization to make sure, am I at a place that I believe I'm going to be working with people that I can have conversations with, that are passionate about what they do, that can give me advice. And it doesn't have to be about our work. It could be about life. It could be about how they learn about something else. And that is it, right? Finding smart people and talking to them. When you show an interest in someone, when you say, can I have 15 minutes because I like the way you handle that conversation and I'd like to get better at that, people will be receptive and give you advice. So that's my first piece, is where you work. It doesn't cost you any money. It's a 10, 15-minute chat. Have that chat. Number two is, I think from a learning LinkedIn, and because I'm that sort of learner where I learn by doing, when I'm learning something, I'm posting about it on LinkedIn. I'm reflecting on what I thought and how it connects to finance, if people who are in finance will find it interesting. So that is one of the reasons I post on LinkedIn, is to share my learning, to kind of remember it for myself, to contextualize it for myself. So that's another way. LinkedIn is such a resource. Even if you don't want to post, if you just want to read, the access to thought leadership. So that's how we met, and just this incredible content that's out there, so rich, something that courses don't even provide. Like just all of this information, people openly speaking about what they do for no other reason but passion and wanting to share it. So that's another way. I believe any topic you grab, and someone's put a really good article out there about it. And just the last point on learning is, we're in this information age. It's not about whether something exists to answer your question. It exists, right? What we need to do is, you need to reflect, what is the problem I am sitting with? You need to articulate, what is that problem I am having? And then you go out there and there will be an answer. But you need to, number one, what is the problem? Is my problem that I want to learn to code? Or is my problem that I want to have a conversation with these really smart people? Is my problem that I actually want to be a Python expert? Or is my problem that I want to understand data science? You need to sit back and reflect on that. But the answer is out there. You need to develop the right question. And that's on learning. And I think my closing remark is, if you're listening to this show, if you're following Asif, and if you're interested in FP&A as a finance professional, I think you're on the right journey. FP&A, finance business partnering, are such exciting spaces to be in. It's the best of all our worlds. So you're on the right journey, and we want the profession to thrive into the future, and we want to become a future fit profession with a focus on technology, data science, and bring our accounting background to that. So look for those like-minded people, because there is a change happening in our profession.
Thank you so much for that. And I agree with your statement that you yourself learn a lot when you post on LinkedIn, or when you write on LinkedIn. So I've experienced that myself as well. And I've learned a lot from following other people who are writing about specific topics that they are passionate about. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I have learned a lot from our conversation today. And I hope we do this sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. Bye-bye.
Bye.